It was one of those nights where the rain never lets up. Just sheets of water falling from a sky like it had a grudge. I was driving my usual late-night shift for a rideshare app. The roads were empty, the kind of quiet that starts to feel loud if you're out in it too long. Around 11:40 p.m., I got a ping. A pickup near the edge of town, right where the streetlights start to thin out. I almost declined. It was getting late, and that part of town always felt forgotten. But I needed the extra fare. So I went. When I pulled up, he was already standing there, right under a flickering streetlight. Tall, thin, wearing a long, dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that dripped rain like it was melting into his shoulders. He didn't say much, just got in, nodded, and gave me an address I didn't recognize. I typed it into the GPS. No matches. I asked him to repeat it, and he did. Same street, same number. I figured maybe it was one of those new developments not on the map yet. Either way, he seemed calm, polite. So I went. The road turned rough fast. Trees closed in on both sides. The kind of blackness your headlights can't quite push back. And then the radio started acting up. First, just static. Then it started cutting in and out, like faint voices were trying to get through. I glanced at the guy in the rearview mirror. He was just sitting there, still, like a shadow that forgot how to breathe. After about 20 minutes, he spoke. "Almost there," he said. His voice was dry, low, like he hadn't used it in years. Then, after a pause, he added, "Wait here when we arrive. I won't be long." A few minutes later, we pulled onto a muddy path that barely looked like a road. Then he said, "Stop here." There was no house, no lights, just trees and the outline of a gate buried in ivy and weeds. He stepped out into the rain and walked down a trail that disappeared into the woods. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I called out. Nothing. Finally, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit like cold needles, and the deeper I walked, the more wrong everything felt. My feet slipped in the mud. Branches scratched at my jacket. Then I saw it. A burned-down house. Just a foundation and a charred stone fireplace still standing. In front of it, half buried in moss, was a plaque. I brushed it off. In memory of Arthur Bell. Lost to the fire, October 12th, 1993. My stomach dropped. That was the name he gave me, Arthur. I looked around, heart pounding. Nothing but wet, black forest. No sign of him. I ran back to the car, slipping, sliding. When I finally got in, I was shaking. I slammed the door, locked it, turned on the heat, and that's when I noticed something. The back seat was soaked. I hadn't heard the door open, and there were no footprints in the mud behind the car. Just a deep, wet outline on the seat, like someone had been sitting there and vanished. I drove straight home. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. A few days later, I looked up the address again. Nothing. No such road. But I found an old article about a man named Arthur Bell. Died in a house fire, trapped inside after lightning struck the power line. They never found his body. Now, every time it rains like that, I think about that night. About the quiet man under the streetlight. And I wonder if he's still out there, looking for a ride back to a home that burned away decades ago. And if you ever see him, just keep driving. It had been raining for hours when I finally got to the cabin. Not just a drizzle, real rain. Heavy, endless, pounding the windshield so hard I could barely see the road. I'd rented the place for the weekend. A solo getaway. I needed space to clear my head. The cabin was tucked deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. Rustic, quiet, surrounded by thick trees. No neighbors. No traffic. Just me, the storm, and the hum of wind through the branches. I unpacked, lit a fire, and tried to relax. But the rain wouldn't let up. It just kept hammering the roof, like it was trying to dig its way in. The power flickered twice before finally cutting out completely. Great. I lit a few candles and settled into the couch with a book, letting the storm fill the silence. I was maybe half a chapter in when I heard it. A voice. Faint, distant crying. At first, I thought it was just the wind, how it sometimes sounds like voices if you're out in the woods long enough. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. A little girl crying outside. I froze. It was raining so hard you could barely see 6 feet ahead. What would a child be doing out there in that? I rushed to the door and opened it, shining my flashlight into the sheets of rain. "Hello," I called out. "Are you okay?" There was a pause, then a response. A tiny, trembling voice. "Help me." It sounded close, just beyond the trees. I threw on my coat and boots and stepped into the storm, calling out again. The flashlight beam cut through the downpour, but I couldn't see her. Every time I called, her voice answered, always a little farther out. "Over here," she'd say. Or, "Please, don't leave." I kept following, heart pounding, soaked to the bone. Mud sucked at my boots. Branches clawed at my sleeves. I slipped more than once, but kept going. I couldn't leave a kid out there. But something was wrong. The crying never got closer. No matter how far I walked, it stayed just out of reach, always behind a tree or beyond a ridge. And then it stopped. Dead silence. No crying. No wind. Not even the rain on the leaves. Just silence. I stood there, flashlight shaking in my hand, when I noticed something, off to the right, half hidden under a fallen tree. A shape. I stepped closer and found an old, crumpled backpack, faded pink, torn at the seams. Inside were a few small toys, a notebook, and a photograph. The picture was of a little girl, maybe 7 or 8. Her name was written on the back in marker, Emily, 1999. That was over 20 years ago. My breath caught. I turned and ran, back through the woods, back toward the cabin. I didn't even try to follow the path anymore. I just ran. When I got inside, I slammed the door and locked it, heart still racing. My clothes were dripping wet. I turned to hang up my coat, and stopped. There were muddy footprints on the floor, tiny ones, trailing from the front door to the middle of the room, and stopping right behind the couch. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the ranger station and told them everything. One of the rangers met me out there. He didn't laugh. He didn't say I was imagining things. He just looked tired. After a long pause, he told me a story. Back in 1999, a little girl named Emily wandered off during a family camping trip not far from the cabin. It had been storming, just like it was when I heard her. They searched for days, but they never found her. People say when it rains and the forest gets quiet enough, you can still hear her crying for help. But you should never follow the voice, because whatever's calling you out there isn't Emily anymore. It was just after 9 p.m. when the power went out. I was staying in my parents' old house for the week. They'd retired down south and asked me to keep an eye on the place. I didn't mind. It was peaceful, quiet. But that night, the rain started just after sunset, and by nightfall, it was coming down in buckets. The kind of rain that makes the whole house feel smaller, like the world outside is being erased, one drop at a time. I lit a few candles and curled up with a blanket in the living room. The flickering light made the shadows dance on the walls. I told myself it was cozy, that I like storms. But the truth is, I've always hated how rain makes you feel isolated, cut off, like you're the last person left in the world. Around 9:30, I heard the knock. 3 sharp taps at the front door. It startled me, mostly because the porch light was out, and I hadn't heard anyone pull into the driveway. The house is pretty remote. If someone shows up unannounced, it's a big deal. I stood, candle in hand, and went to the door. "Hello," I called. No answer. I opened it slowly. The rain blew sideways into the entryway, soaking my socks. But no one was there. Just empty steps and the sound of water running through the gutters. Weird, I thought. Maybe tree branches? Or a package delivery. But there was nothing. I shut the door, locked it, and turned back toward the living room. That's when the knock came again. 3 more taps. But this time from the back door. My stomach dropped. There's no way someone could have gotten from the front porch to the back door that fast, especially not through the side yard, which was basically a swamp by then. I moved slowly toward the back of the house, candle trembling in my hand. Again I called out, "Who's there?" No reply. But as I reached for the curtain to look out the kitchen window, I froze. On the foggy glass of the back door were fingerprints, small ones, pressed into the condensation from the inside. I backed away. I knew I hadn't touched that door all day. I'd locked it after bringing in firewood earlier that morning. I grabbed my phone and called the sheriff's non-emergency line. No signal. I tried texting my sister. Nothing sent. I was just about to grab my keys and leave when the power suddenly flickered back on. The house lit up all at once, lamps, appliances, everything buzzing back to life. And that's when I noticed something chilling. The digital clock on the microwave, it didn't just reset. It showed the correct time. 9:42 p.m. The power hadn't gone out. It had been cut. That realization hit me so hard I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at that clock. That's when I heard the knock one more time. But this time, it came from the hallway closet, right behind me. 3 soft knocks. Close. Deliberate. I turned slowly. The closet door stood perfectly still, but my gut told me something wasn't right. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I backed away and left the house without even grabbing my shoes. Drove straight to the nearest gas station and didn't go back until morning, with 2 deputies beside me. They searched the house top to bottom. Nothing was missing. No signs of forced entry. But in that closet they found a small, soaked towel and a child's jacket. One the deputies said looked like it had been there a long time. Years, maybe. But I'd lived in that house growing up. I knew that closet. That jacket was never there before. Later, I did some digging. Found an article from years back. A family that lived on the same street. Their daughter went missing during a storm. She'd been knocking on doors for help, but no one answered in time. Now they say she still knocks. Once to ask for help. Twice to see if he'll open the door. And the third, to let herself in.